right? And so, okay, if the certificates are the driver of it all and they need to develop, then we our MVP has to develop over time, and this is not a good, it's never a good prerequisite for an MVP.
Yeah. Oh, is my mic working? Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I would say that the queries need to, from my understanding, the queries would happen against a database or a like
Mm-hmm.
evidence base.
Mm-hmm.
And from what I understood, Tanner
Mm-hmm.
was kind of describing as IAM as the protocol that builds that evidence base. And so if you have digital
Mm-hmm.
content that gets distributed and people read an article and
Mm-hmm.
the IAM protocol
Mm-hmm.
tracks the metadata that this person read that article,
Mm-hmm.
then that's your evidence base that you query against when you're looking when you're building queries. So the
Yeah.
MVP is more like we're just testing out this evidence base,
Okay, then
not
it would be
necessarily building
rather,
queries yet.
okay, technical feasibility and once against it. And I mean, still, it's a chicken and egg, right? What are the
Mm-hmm.
articles and what are the queries? And we
Totally.
would have to define a starting point. But okay, got you.
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense. David Moon is requesting access. Do you know David? Ah,
Um,
he's part of Longtail crowd, isn't he?
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I also, this meeting was, we posted it on the TE
Mm-hmm.
community calendar, so I think, or it's possible that others jump in too.
Mm-hmm.
I know Olivia was planning to join. Oh, and you're still in the labs channel, actually.
Oh, I should leave perhaps.
Yeah, that's funny.
Thanks, letting me know.
Hey, y'all.
Hello.
Hi there.
Hello.
Is this an open meeting?
Yes, please stay.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah, totally.
I just messaging Eli. He'll be a couple of minutes late.
Yeah, my name's David, and I'm going to be trying to help out with the Twitter for Token Engineering Commons.
Ah, cool.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, it's a pretty amazing project you have going here.
Yeah. Are you new to the community? I mean, we haven't met. I'm Angela, TE Academy.
Yeah, but you could say that. It's been a couple months now, but I'm definitely new.
Okay. Well, I mean, a couple of months is not new, isn't
I don't know. How long have you been around here?
A couple of months, actually. Hi, Livy.
Hello. One day in crypto is like a year.
Yeah, exactly.
Normal world.
I think it was last week I joined.
Yeah, nice to meet you, David. Yeah, I was just gonna say my name's Peter. That's all that.
Peter Hacker.
Yeah, Peter Hacker, and on Discord it's Heater. You see me around.
Okay.
Yeah.
Peter Party.
Peter what?
Peter Party.
Peter
How
Parker?
are you involved?
Peter Party.
Peter Party. Oh yeah, that was my from the Ecosystem Value Flows course.
Yeah.
Party Peter.
Now I got it.
Yeah, because we did the name
see.
game.
Yeah. But
Wow,
Peter Hacker is actually your real name, isn't it?
Yeah, Peter
because
Hacker.
in this context, you always think it's a...
Yeah, I know. It's funny. My dad also works in IT security. So. Yeah, it's meant to be.
Yeah, great talking point.
His name?
His first name's Ted, but last name Hacker. Yeah. So.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
Hi, Tana.
Hey. How are you guys?
Hey, thanks
Good,
for joining.
Good, good. We just got a new puppy a couple days ago, so I'm like,
Oh,
been like four or 5 hours of sleep the past
Ooh.
50 something hours.
worth it.
Okay.
But
I'm sure.
she's adorable. She's adorable though, so it's worth it. Yeah.
What kind of dog?
Weimaraner.
Oh yeah, very nice.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, that's me.
I have a 3-year-old golden doodle.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that was yeah, because my wife is allergic to many breeds, so we looked into that as well. 'Cause they're don't trigger allergies, right?
Yeah, non-shedding.
Yeah. So, cool.
All right.
So it
then.
sounds like there's been some progress, some updates, but you guys don't want to define the policies too quickly. Is that the concern?
Yeah, roughly speaking. So we have been discussing our approach in last 2 weeks, and we feel like, okay, there are some elements that fit nicely to IAM, or we feel like, and some elements that are equally important, but probably are the driver, which is certification. And certification is probably not core IAM protocol. And this is why we thought, okay, maybe let's have a second chat, and then from there decide on what should be next. And yeah, if we can directly enter a project with you guys, Tana, or if we should take a different route. And maybe some first element before I think Eli joins for this certification thoughts is we were all, I think, when we talked about proposals, we were thinking about the TE Commons proposal to develop this, since I mean this education knowledge dissemination thing is a core element in token engineering. Nevertheless, TE Commons proposals and particularly funds distribution won't happen before August, September, probably. And this might be also, I don't know if this is a showstopper or not a showstopper, but then also important for your roadmap, Tana.
It's not a showstopper because basically we'll make time for token engineering community because it's not just about our resources and money. And we actually have some other partnerships that we're about to announce that actually are synergistic. So there's like certain types of content that we're going to be building plugins for actually kills multiple birds with one stone, right? And so so that's good. Yeah, and it's also we've kind of dialed back the scope of some of them so that we can just validate some of the crazy requirements first. So I think that will be all right. Yeah. For August or September. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's cool. And gives us also time to be more specific on what we actually want to see build first for our MVP. I don't know, Peter, can you pull up the Miro and we look at the last draft for the certification is driving the education.
Yes, definitely. Okay. Ooh. All right. Is it working? Cool. And where did you want to start?
Eli's, or perhaps he can present himself, and I first dig into the. Yeah, this is that one. Okay, so let's start this way. Eli will, in a minute, once he's able to join, tell us more about our approach that we want to make certification the driver. And this is perhaps counterintuitive, but we feel like, oh yes, to have maximum flexibility on the knowledge dissemination and also creativity and education, this is an interesting direction to take. And some thoughts on certification first. I think I'll share my screen, Peter, with the Notion. Yes. So we've asked ourselves, okay, what's the motivation for certification in general and also in the token engineering community? So who are the recipients or the consumers of a certificate? And we have 3 categories here. A is, as an example, employers of token engineers or anyone who is looking for efficiency. Second, B, rather, here's an example in the academic setting. So here, rather looking for creativity and excellence. And the third one is personal motivation, looking for uniqueness. And these 3 recipients and consumers have different requirements on the certificate and on the underlying knowledge or skills. And this might refer to different certification mechanisms, and then also in different, let's say, journeys towards a certification and different education formats, and then as a result, different pieces of content or knowledge that we want to track via IAM, so generally spoken. And if we take a closer look to these 3, with A, what do we mean here? This is about creating a productive system and productive flow. So you try to put together a productive team, and you're looking for somebody who is the perfect new team member. And you want to have efficiency, less stress, more surplus, a guarantee for desired properties of a candidate. And for token engineering, this could, for example, mean like, okay, you want to have somebody who knows about the general token engineering body of knowledge, like the major paradigms, major mechanisms, their pros and cons, or the token engineering general process, token engineering tech stack like the CatCat or Token Spice, or even other but shared frameworks to use in token engineering, or a shared visual language to be able to discuss an ecosystem and value flows. So this is this kind of knowledge we need for this category A, and this can probably be easily verified in a standard fully automated way. So the simplest example would be the online checkboxes, or it can be also peer certification, but it's pretty, let's say, we are very close to a standardized standardized body of knowledge here in A. In B, this is different. So again, here we are looking for creativity and excellence, like letters of recommendation, or you recommend somebody and put your own reputation at stake. That's also an important element here. It's covering not only knowledge, like you read something and you know and understand it, but also about skills. And skills we define here like you're able to apply it, and you have proven to your ability and capability to apply it and come up with new concepts based on this. For B, we probably need a more flexible approach, rather aiming for comparison, not for properties itself. So this might be something for mutual verification only. So for example, I've worked with this person and you can't automate it. And it's also probably need to cover a really wide variety of skills and very specific combinations. So it's not, okay, in B, it's not about mechanism designs. This is much more specific, like this person has experience in governance mechanism design in an improvement cycle with focus on data science and machine learning, that not only the design, but also the implementation. This is something we need in B. And again, it's not only about the knowledge itself, it's about being creative in applying this knowledge, and therefore we expect it's human verifiable only and not automatable. And C is personal motivation, looking for your own uniqueness. So your journey in learning and applying knowledge, which is really unique then. It's not about matching a standard. It's rather perhaps being proud of your unique journey and your unique combination of knowledge and skills in the token engineering field, but still it's not about matching a standard. And here it's probably rather a map of uniqueness. And I'm not sure if there is any certification here. It's rather this, okay, this network of knowledge and skills, which can be totally unique. Okay. And for this defining certification, we need to understand and prioritize motivation. So of course, A has different requirements from B, and we are looking for different things. So in A, probably we can focus on knowledge, whereas in B, I'm not sure if there's even a value in having this knowledge, this learning knowledge only, or if it's always related to skills. So this is some background on the certification thing. I'm still, there's Eli. I'll let him in the call, and then we can continue with the certification first approach. Or any questions here on the certification, these three?
Yeah, I think that, not a question, but, you know, I don't think that even certifications, everything that we are building is just tools to help us make decisions, right? And this type of looking for creativity and excellence, that's an interesting thing, because yeah, you have a person who might qualify as having those traits, but they don't objectively have those traits, or like intersubjectively have those traits. They only have those traits to some people. Some people think I'm very creative because of the types of systems I design. Some people think I'm extremely dull because coding isn't that creative of an activity, right? And so the idea isn't to encode these types of traits, it's to encode information and structure it and create the relationships so that someone can then build a tool or write some queries to find that. And that's a lot easier, and it's a lot more feasible, and it's a lot more effective, because if you don't do it that way, then you're deciding what's creative for everyone. And I'm not really always a fan of over abstracting. I think that sometimes you need to take an opinionated stance, but in this case, taking an opinionated stance is actually creates a lot more work, because you actually broaden the scope by taking an opinionated stance, where usually by doing that you tighten the scope. So
yeah, that's an interesting point. We had that just in our prior discussion with Peter, where Peter, you mentioned, okay, at some point, maybe not now, but at some point, these queries will define the standard, right, Peter?
Yeah. I totally agree with Tanner. I think I like the way of thinking about it as like an evidence base and then the query. So like the evidence base is understanding the distribution of knowledge across the network, or of content, digital content across the network. And then the queries could be anything. Like you could write a query that serves the purpose or serves the needs of employers that are looking for certain things. And if that query does its job, then employers will use it to find people who have that knowledge in the evidence base. Or if you're looking for people who have fit a certain academic criteria for a specific research project, then there might be a query that reads off of the evidence base and finds people who would fit that role well. And if that query works, then the people who are coordinating the research would use that query naturally. And I guess my question for Tanner is, does that, like the way that I just explained it, is that how you think about it, or am I missing any pieces? And then is IAM protocol, is that more focused on the evidence base than the queries, or what would the link there be?
Right. So first of all, yeah, that's how I'm thinking about this level, to clarify, the difference between these more abstract values and what's actually observable in a machine, like recorded machine-based records, right? And then the thing is that, what does it mean? What are the different ways that someone might interact with the evidence base? It could be queries, right? Or it could be creating higher level constructs that encode their specific way values and preferences. And you get these sort of higher level digital objects, right? So for example, certifications is a higher level digital object, actually, because it requires evidence, but then the certification is issued based on the required evidence and based on the issuer's implicit expectations of what qualifies as adequate training, right? Sufficient training. Maybe you need to absolutely have expertise, or maybe you need to be simply good enough to do some damage, right? Those are different preferences. So certification, by the very fact of issuing it, you've to some person, you've taken a stance, and you can encode that stuff, and then and then you can develop relations between them. So I would say that the evidence base can pretty much you just need it to be something that's verifiable. You can do that on so many decentralized data stores, and I wouldn't do that on a blockchain. What I would do on a blockchain is a certification is analogous to a query in this discussion, because a query takes a stance. A certification also takes a stance about the data. And so certifications, queries, and then rewards, right? You want to reward, you want to set value flows, that type of thing based on the evidence. Basically, the what goes on the blockchain is basically the verification routes, so that you can verify that the data still has integrity, and then you encode those views. Those views are NFTs, and that's what. Anyway, we just don't usually think about them. But when you use a token, you're actually making an assertion about something and talking about your own preferences in a certain context. We just don't think of it or talk about them in that way. But tokens in general, and using them, are commitments to certain views of an underlying data set. Maybe that data set isn't machine represented. Maybe it involves, of course, things like external market behavior, but it always is going to be what goes on a blockchain is a view and a commitment to a certain way of thinking about things and valuing a certain set of information.
The only element that is so seems like, okay, yeah, that's it's a viable, interesting approach. The only challenge we have is that what's evidence in our case? What's evidence for knowledge? What's evidence for skill?
Yeah, I think that it's, decentralized identity style. You always have authorities, issuers, right? Like the cat.education, right? It's the creators of that program are going to be the ones to attest that I completed that satisfactorily, right? It's not completely decentralized, because that wouldn't make sense if it's from a certain source. So that would be, my work would be the evidence, my submissions, and my view would be the certification by them that those submissions are of adequate quality, right? Sufficient quality. Those types of that type of thing. So you'd have it's always hierarchies when we're talking about credentialing systems. You're always going to have hierarchies, which is actually good because you get this transitive trust thing. There are a network of trust models, of course, but there's some disadvantages to them. But then what you can do is you start with that hierarchy and fewer root nodes, right? Because there aren't a ton of experts in the token engineering field specifically anyway, right? Those people have extra trust, right? I trust, if I ask Z a question about about economic design, I'm going to trust him more than someone who just joined the token engineering Discord channel. And it's not just because I know him, even if I purely knew of him or have heard his name before, right? Or I could, if I never heard him at all, I could just look him up, right? And now we get to the next thing, is that I have to look him up to understand what if when with this new type of system, I don't need to go play detective and look into what he's done and the quality and who attests that he's good. That's all based on the evidence base, as well as the various ways that people and other projects have already valued his evidence, right? When someone cites a paper that I write, that's that they're basically making a claim that my paper is relevant to what they're doing. They've valued my paper some way. And so it basically takes the tokens, the certifications, the views. What they do is they take a distributed set of evidence and aggregate them into something that's local to the person who's looking at it, right? So that's
a general concept and makes sense, even though we have to break it down for the MVP then again, because we have a couple of chicken and egg problems here, since we we don't have this evidence we would make, there's a first step in making this somehow, there is citation and building on, and there is linkage between articles and quotes. That is certainly there, but we don't have it available as evidence, I'd say, in the system yet. And next one is this self-enforcing cycles where you have a certain article, you make it available, and only by making it available, of course, you create more citations and quotes. That's another element. And so this is on the knowledge creation side. And then on the certification side, similarly, of course, in the long run, queries can lead to a certain view and then to a certificate, ultimately. However, for an MVP, of course, we have to start somewhere. But that's only on a side note. It's rather than talking about, okay, how to shape the MVP. In general, fully agree. There's a wide space, and that's also very inspiring to think about, okay, education and certification. That's great.
Yeah, and I think that for the MVP, using the views and the certifications to kind of do everything that I mentioned, that's kind of working backwards. And then we understand what we want. Now, what are the things that people can get immediate value out of, that if they keep doing that results in that system, right? And I can already think about plenty of these things, right? And there are many programming patterns now for getting information and getting people to clean up information, and like evict stale information. Like in DeFi, we all call them keepers, right? Keeper is a very abstract term, but basically, do this, you get rewarded, right? And what's interesting is that what you get rewarded with can be very different in this system, because by the very fact that you're valuing that you're creating this system, you're committing to valuing certain types of behaviors and attributes of people, right? In a very general sense. So keepers, well, if you're a keeper and you consistently create links between knowledge entries, and those links are verifiably relevant and accurate, then you have more trust. Now you're better at being a steward of the evidence base, and therefore maybe you get rewarded more over time, or maybe the protocol that prefers you. So when you have to perform a node lookup, like, you're higher in the list, right? I don't know. There's so many ways to make it valuable, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. And this I consider a very important public good for token engineering, right? For developing this discipline. So this could be absolutely part of the utility functions for the TEC tokens.
Yeah, and I actually think it's a really good position, because token engineering, there's a lot of camaraderie. Even if you don't know the people, it's still small enough where, like, I don't know everyone in the token engineering community, obviously, but I still feel a sense of camaraderie with them, and I'll still like sit down to talk with them and enter into it believing that we're going to build something cool, right? Instead of entering into it being like, let me evaluate your idea and get back to you on whether it's worth my time, right? I just believe that it's worth my time. So that there's social level trust already, and people will do things purely because they love it, because it's small enough and it's fun and it's just the culture. You can leverage that to make up for the lack of having the network that will eventually provide that same level of trust. You don't have that level of trust in a technical solution right now, but you have it culturally because of the size and the community. So you use the size and the community, those advantages and the implicit trust that's already there, to get people to just do it. They'll just do it because they want to please other people in the community. And then as the community grows, that will no longer be feasible. But since you were having people already build up that system when it was feasible, you're in a good position still.
Compared to other communities, yeah.
Right.
You might be right, yeah.
So I don't think it's in the chicken and egg situation. I think that there's a strong culture here that can make up for that solves that. It's just like I am, right? Like, we were on deadlines and stuff. We reduced the scope of another project to accommodate this one, even though it very likely means less revenue this year, right? But worth it, right? And that's the kind of thing that, I mean, everyone's like that in this community, basically. So
that's awesome.
Cool. That sounds great. Thanks, Stano, for this comment. Yeah. I just want, Eli, you mentioned a couple of questions or a proposal, and maybe we should take a look on this certification is the driver. Have you the Miro board ready to take a look at it?
Yeah, I have it up. But I think listening to you and Tanner speak about this sort of higher order sort of certifications, or just like higher order subjective opinions, I think this idea of like tokenizing subjective opinions, what I claim about myself, what I claim about other people, what other people claim about me, and then allowing people to compose those into things like certifications might actually just be like a lot cleaner of a way of going about it. But maybe they're not mutually exclusive.
Yeah,
So all
also I have some opinions on that, but maybe let's go first with the
Yeah.
another discussion.
Yeah, I was just gonna say the elegance of that approach is that if you create a way for people to sort of tokenize their own subjective opinions, then you sort of have created the ecosystem or the niche that then will be filled because people will like need that. You don't have to force it on people.
Yeah.
But anyways, let me pull this up.
I'd also just have one question about a point Tanner mentioned. So where you mentioned that like credential systems have hierarchies, and then we've talked about like the evidence base up to the queries and what would be stored on the blockchain, et cetera. What level of the credential system does IAM protocol currently work at? Or like if this MVP were to happen, like what level of that system, what pieces of it would be part of the MVP?
Yeah, IAM is a protocol for building those types of systems. So basically,
Like
you'd have to decide.
Kind of.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and so basically what would happen is, I mean, there's already the common stack, right? Maybe you want to pull in that data as a way to bootstrap the hierarchy. Basically, there are in credentialing systems, there's always like the top level issuer. And then if you have a particular certificate, all that someone who's trying to verify your credential has to do is see if your credential is signed by the verified issuer, which is like a top level organization, right? Think like ICANN or something, right? And but then ICANN verifies, or some top level organization can verify issuers or assign credentials for issuers to in a smaller scope, right? But that's all up to you. The token engineering is a new discipline. Who knows what the hierarchy is like? But I think that we already have that we have Token Engineering Academy, we've got CAD-CAD.education. There are engagements with external companies. That's a natural place to start. And, we can always adapt it and change it as needed in this phase. Finally, there's just one thing I want to say about the, tokenizing subjectivity and these types of things. It's possible. So the reason that I think about it that way is because tokens, as we think of them, don't carry that information, but our actions about them do, right? So when I perform an action with my token on, say, another system or another token, maybe a swap, I'm saying something about my preferences. But with IAM, you can define, this is what policies are, is they're rules about the sequences of behaviors of tokens. So I can say things like, I will not allow this token to be swapped for another token whose, whose liquidity measured by this function is less than 70%, right? I can make that type of policy declaratively, and the IAM protocol will automatically enforce that so that it can be swapped for anything, right? Because I don't know how much smart contract development you guys have done in the past, but a common pattern is having to manually whitelist new trusted contracts because you can't inspect the contract automatically to understand and even if you could, you can't verify that it correctly implements the standard, even if it has the right functions. With IAM, you can do that because it's all based on properties, right? So you can inspect higher order, first order, second order, third order, and that's how you encode more and more complex policies. It's just how many orders is it? That's like the measure of the complexity of the policy. Anyway.
Cool. That's helpful. Thanks.
Okay, Eli, should we go over this board and the draft here?
Sure, yeah. I'll try to keep it relatively simple and concise and not just blabber on. But the sort of thinking behind this, down here was, rather than trying to map out how value flows between all sort of types of knowledge, what if we just create demand for it? So people sort of build these highways or value flows for us, and they emerge sort of naturally. It's like more of an emergent engineering approach. So, just the idea here is if you have some certification, like, TE Academy fundamentals or whatever, then that will say be used by, a company hiring, obviously, and that creates demand. And when you have a demand for certification, obviously you have demand for instruction, for knowledge, for explanations, and that sort of just emerges naturally. So it was just a sort of idea of what if we flip this thinking around. And I just added this, sort of down here from this conversation we're having. This, maybe the MVP, we target this base layer of just subjective labeling of people or things for certain qualities. And when you do that, you can compose those into things like certifications. So rather than saying, hey, let's make this certification or that certification, we focus on like, what is the soil for people to create all kinds of certifications? So go like a level deeper, which is sort of what I'm interpreting this conversation we're having now as. So, yeah, I hope that makes sense.
Maybe you can give an example, because I think this is, as you mentioned last round, it's a bit counterintuitive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I guess I was sort of drafting out some examples down here. So
I appreciate the nice bullet point.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically, the idea is you don't know what certifications are the best certifications. Like TE might come up with this is a good token engineer. But you don't really know. So you want sort of a more dynamic, evolutionary, create new things, break things attitude. So the idea here is that you start at the layer of just, I enjoy working with Angela and Peter, and someone can, build a reputation system over that. It's sort of like a micro local reputation system, which can be composed. For example, the TEC thinks that I have basic token engineering knowledge, and that's obviously just sort of like a one-to-one mapping into an NFT. But then, take something like Zargum thinks that this paper is a good paper. So now you actually have a rating system, an emergent rating system for things like knowledge. And that could also be composed into skill levels or knowledge. So for example, if I'm reading a lot of papers that the best token engineers are saying are the best papers, then that can be used and quantified differently as just, reading a pop blog post on token engineering. So the idea is you create this design space that you don't even know what's going to happen. You're just creating the conditions for it, which is counterintuitive because you're not really building what you want. You're just building the soil for what you want, or the seeds.
Yeah, I agree with this approach, except that I don't think that the subjective claims belongs in the base layer. What it is that, let's see here. It's actions about the things, the subject of the claim, right? So Zargum attesting or just making an opinion that you have a really good paper. Well, he might be lying. He might be being polite. You might be forcing him into it or blackmailing him. But more than likely, he's not going to cite that paper in 5 of his papers, even if unless he actually believes that, right? So it's more about tokenizing the relationships between elemental data, like actual concrete data, and then you're basically saying that indicates this type of preference or this opinion. But so you see what I mean? So it's actually the this two levels, not the interests of learners, but the base layer, tokenized subjective opinions, and the layer right above that are more like they're swapped. Or you could even put them on the same level. There's no one single right way, because when a certification is just the opinion of someone who we treat as kind of very seriously, right? Like a degree, many people's opinions based on other people's opinions that I learned. But because as a whole, we really care about that entity's opinion, it's a certification. The certification is about a set of work. So so those could be at the same level, or they could be inverted. But that's kind of how I think it emerges. Is when you're if at the base level you have to rely on people being honest, then you now need ad hoc ways to roll back in the case of dishonesty. And as token engineering scales, people will be dishonest. Even in token engineering community today, people are over polite sometimes, right? People are always willing to support each other, but people are over polite. I've noticed that. And that can be detrimental, because people need honesty sometimes to make the right decision. So yeah, that's just.
So
Yeah.
you say, I just wanted to briefly mention, it's not that that subjective opinions are not should be excluded altogether. It's rather how to find the best way to limit dishonesty, or just focus on honesty and it's not subjective versus objective. It's rather about honest ratings and honest opinion, right?
Yeah. Right. It's basically, which one are you trying to capture, right? It's much harder to verify this person thinks this than it is to, I mean, what am I trying to say?
Yeah.
It's does this, and therefore they think this. So it's just about what's the easy path of least resistance to get the most honesty. And then the other thing is that you could think of it that way. If you also really like perfect abstractions, you can think of it like this: an opinion is always about about something. In this case, in these types of claims, it's an opinion about a person or some like entity based on a set of knowledge that the person making the claim has. And so those are two more elemental pieces of data that need to be captured at a lower level. So if you want to use the abstraction mindset to justify this layering, or you want to use the mechanism design incentivizing honesty, each one leads to that same conclusion of the opinions, what I claim about you, being at a not the base level.
Yeah,
I like what you said about the
Go ahead, Livia.
about the relationship bringing the legitimacy to it, because you start to visualize a map. Then if the multiple meeting points are the points that start to make that knowledge to bring legitimacy to that data or to that knowledge, then you start to see how decentralized the space actually is and how many nodes are validating that type of knowledge. So all of these meeting points, all of the relationships, they become these nodes, and the way that they are connected with each other can enhance or loosen the legitimacy of it. So if someone is like in the edge of the system, and it's not connected to any of those nodes, probably there is a very little legitimacy. But then if it's in the very middle and the core of all of those nodes, it has a huge legitimacy, and this can scale more easily, perhaps.
Yes. And the thing is that sometimes, right, there's links. You can just have nodes and links between them. And then there's property graphs, right, where the links are actually enriched with additional properties. And that's the kind of thing that you're really going for, because you have a multi-dimensional, like many variables that someone might use to determine the strength of that link, and then perform like, okay, well then what's the centrality of that node, not based on how many links are incoming, but the strength of those links based on 1 out of 100 properties. And so that's kind of what we're building for the what I believe we're building the MVP, at least, is just those fundamental structures where basically we're building the symbols that people are going to string together to write more and more complicated sentences and essays and books, right? That's how I view tokens too, right? When you use a token, you're making a statement. You're just making more complicated statements, more sophisticated statements. So you need more sophisticated token model. Yeah. But we don't have to define every statement that can be made. We just define the very small set of symbols that people can combine to make all those statements.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and certainly I think, but perhaps not now, because I really appreciate this brainstorming around this, all the connections we can make, and this wide design space of statements we can have. At some point, I just, okay, what's actually what do we want to find out in the MVP? And of course, then for me it would be, okay, I want to see the combination of words in your metaphor to one simple sentence. So, for example, but this is to be discussed, of course.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think for the MVP, it's, first of all, you need a verifiable knowledge base where participants can not write their opinions down, but use that knowledge base to produce further knowledge in a way where that decision is recorded. And then you can do things like have more ancillary style data, like, for example, incentives for certain types of deliverables. But this can all be defined. It's actually very simple what you need, because you just need relationships with properties, and you need people to be able to make decisions and create tokens based off of the earlier tokens with additional data attached to them. And that's why it's hard with typical NFTs, because you have to define the whole data model up front, whereas you're designing this very emergent thing. So you need these evolvable data models that still are constrained to certain guarantees, right? That's why they're static data models, because you can't offer guarantees about the future. Otherwise, but actually with property-based NFTs and tokens, you can create fuzzy boundaries to say, at least these things are true, but they can do anything else with it, and that's verified, right? So I would just say a knowledge base, figure out what kinds of sources of knowledge, for each source of knowledge, what's a simple way to verify that knowledge, that the reference to it or the record of it is accurate to the external world, right? Usually that involves giving people rewards for running nodes that automatically check those things, right? And then you just say what is the absolute simplest data structure to represent these things, and then people that use it can extend that data structure without undermining the fidelity of yours, because basically that's one of the guarantees offered at the lowest level, the IAM protocol. Yeah, so it's really just a knowledge graph.
And
where the nodes are very different, the nodes can be very differently structured. So heterogeneous nodes, knowledge graph. Yeah.
Okay. And the sources of knowledge that you mentioned, would that be the different types of digital content that, like an article or a video or something like that, from an education perspective, it could be those things, like those are the sources of knowledge that you're talking about?
Yeah. And there's a source of knowledge. There's sources of knowledge at the start that you're bringing in. Then there's the sources of knowledge that get created. The way that you verify their validity might be different. But yeah, there's always that kind of sequence.
Mm.
I mean, so if you think about it like that, like at any node that's a piece of knowledge, that knowledge can be as complicated, as sophisticated structure as possible, right? It could be an entire school, right? A very composite structure, or a curriculum. And you can say that anything that uses this as input, so assignments that are handed in, would be that. You can define what happens when that state change happens. What I mean is, you can just say issue a token that rewards people when they do that. If that kind of using the course as input and an assignment as output, right? You're adding another piece of knowledge based on the course material itself.
Yeah.
You can say, well, if this assignment hand in has these properties, then then they will receive one token. Or you can say that this assignment that's created and handed in must have the property that the instructor address can issue them a token instead, right? So you can, in that way, you can define different types of incentive schemes and policies. But it can be simple, right? I don't know if this sounds simple only because it's all I think about, because I'm so close to IAM, or if it's simple, but I really only see it as like a few things. You only have to commit to a few things for the MVP. The rest can be defined by creating, by people using it. And yeah.
Yeah, it's super helpful for me, at least, to just hear you talk about this stuff too, because like you said, you're super deep on it. So yeah, learning a lot. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I like talking too much sometimes. I feel like Zargum that way, because I'll ask him a simple question and it's like a 20-minute answer, and I feel like I do the same thing sometimes. Yeah. No.
Okay, I think this was super helpful, Tana. And as you say, finally the MVP might be pretty simple and totally obvious. It's just digesting. Okay, what's the best route now to build these core components, and also to define the first boundaries in terms how do we verify, how do we design the rewards to get everyone to drive the system in the right direction. I guess now this is the work to be done, but that was super helpful. And I'd suggest that we continue working on that and just keep you posted. I think these core components defined is the next checkpoint for us, right? To continue the conversation.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I mean, thing is that you don't need to know the process through which the stuff needs to be verified. Like the way that, like, okay, when solving a coding problem, usually you do it like a thing that I do is I solve it by hand, and my brain does things, right? We do things that we take for granted, but then we have to make it explicit in order to code it up. If I'm trying to verify that this article is correct, I'm going to go look it up and see what people think about it, and talk to the person, and like make sure those links are stale and up to date, and all these types of things. I'm not necessarily thinking about all the steps a computer has to take to make that part of the protocol. It's all manual. That's all you have to define. Everything that can be, most things can be started as manual and then become automated afterward and codified afterward. So just keep that in mind. Yeah, that you can reduce the scope even more to just the data model and pointing out what types of evidence you might consider personally as being as indicating validity of that data.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other comments? Anyone? Not at this point?
No,
Nothing from me.
I got a lot to think about.
Okay.
Plenty to think about.
Yeah, too. Okay, all right. Jana, we'll let you know once we are ready to take the next step. I think, yeah, you have outlined very, very clearly what should be the components we should aim for and we should define. And we still, I guess we are all on the same page. We try to make it a T-Commons proposal, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Great. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks.
Super cool. Thank you, Tanner.
Yep. Catch you guys later.
Soon.
Thank you all.
Yep.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.